I have no idea how to process it all, and I understand it's a lot to take in. It's been 2 months since D-Day, and my wife and I decided to work on our marriage. Here is some background. We've been married for over 10 years and have a 4-year-old child with a disability. We've had both good and bad times during our marriage. Work and school became extremely stressful for both of us in 2016, and we ended up separating for 4 months. I wasn't the easiest husband to deal with in the beginning, but I worked on my issues and was always willing to seek counseling. I actively participated, accepted responsibility for my actions, and the therapists held me accountable. Whenever problems arose, I was determined to make things better. In early March, I discovered she was cheating when a text message from the person she was having an affair with appeared on her phone. The message read, "I love you back." The word "back" indicates that my wife told him she loved him. So you can imagine how my evening went as I hung out with friends trying to figure out what that might mean. I decided to look up the guy and discovered that he was one of her co-workers who worked for her. When I got home in the early morning, I prepared to check her phone, but what I discovered was not good. There were text messages expressing love and deep feelings for one another. They both admitted that they were struggling to resist their emotions. Let's go back to February 20th, 22. My wife approached me at the start of my workday, which happened to be a work-from-home day, and informed me that she had something important to discuss. I agreed to listen, and then she revealed that she was thinking about getting a divorce. This took me completely by surprise, but I listened for the next 2 hours while I was supposed to be working from home. It was difficult to accept everything that was going on as she went into detail about a list of 5 things she absolutely would not compromise on, and 15 other points that were extremely important to her that she wanted me to work on. But I tried to handle it with grace, despite the fact that the talk of divorce completely caught me off guard. Following that meeting, I worked on that list for the next year or so as if it were the most important thing in my life, which it was. You can imagine how surprised I was in early March 20th, 23, when I discovered a text from the person my spouse was having an affair with, someone I had no idea about until then. What I've discovered since then is that my wife had already given up on our marriage when she gave me that list. She didn't express it explicitly at the time, but speaking with her now, it's clear that was the case, and she never informed me. So I received this list, but she did not follow up on it. Instead, she only complained to me about one item on the list that I had not finished. Everything makes sense now. After discovering the affair, which she began in the same month, she expressed her desire for a divorce. She began telling her co-workers, including her bosses, co-workers, and those who worked beneath her, about our strained relationship and the possibility of divorce. According to my therapist, she was looking for support for a divorce when she unexpectedly met someone who not only supported the idea of divorce, but also began an affair with her subordinate. It's worth noting that my wife works primarily from home due to COVID restrictions. She wasn't actually spending 4,050 hours per week with this guy. They primarily communicated via Zoom, but did not meet in person until July 2022 when they went on a lunch date. That appears to be when my wife began to realize her feelings for the guy. They were already discussing and complaining about their respective partners, pointing out perceived flaws in our relationships. They began asking each other questions about their own relationships. They soon began sharing personal secrets that their actual partners were unaware of. Then, in August 2022, when their employer required them to be physically present at work 1 day per week, my wife claims they became inseparable. They would take breaks together, eat lunch together, walk to their cars together, and eventually end up in cubicles next to each other. My wife officially quit her job in early February, claiming that she wanted to devote more time to our family. That is what she told me. Interestingly, she confessed her love to her subordinate on the same day, and he reciprocated for the next 5 weeks. They spent a lot of time texting, calling, and emailing each other, and they even went on 1 date. I'm not sure if I caught it before it became physical, but there is a chance I did. I have text messages and emails indicating that it did not necessarily go physical, but some of the details are so unbelievable that it's difficult to believe it didn't. According to my wife, he was actively looking for a new apartment and was prepared to leave his 7-year girlfriend. Who does this? Unless they have already made serious commitments to someone else. Let us refer to the day I confronted my wife as D-Day. It was early morning. I had gathered sufficient evidence, including taking photos and emailing them to myself from her phone. She initially tried to lie about it, but when I told her that I had recorded her conversations, she began to blame me. It was an interesting time, but I handled it well, calmly acknowledged her challenges, and continued to move forward. She claimed she couldn't cut off contact with him because they were working on a creative project together, a book. I somehow found the presence of mind to suggest that she refrained from making contact until we met with our marriage therapist, who would then decide on the rules of communication. Surprisingly, she agreed. I also made it clear that she had known something about the guy. The following day, she was given the opportunity to call him herself, on what I'll call D-Day. I confronted my wife in the early morning. I collected enough evidence by taking photos and emailing them to myself from her phone. She initially tried to lie about it, but when I revealed that I had documented her messages, she quickly shifted to blaming me. Good times. But you know what? We did not let it bring me down. I took it in stride, recognized the difficulties she was facing, and kept moving forward. She claimed she couldn't break off contact with the guy because they were working on a creative project, specifically a book. I mustered the courage to ask her if she could stop contacting him until we could meet with our marriage therapist. I thought it would be best to let the therapist decide how we should communicate. Surprisingly, she agreed. I also made it clear that she needed to end things with the guy by the next day, and I even gave her the option of making the call herself. I wish I had been present during that phone call because I later discovered that a lot of unnecessary topics were discussed at the time. It turns out she spent the next 2 weeks trying to balance having both her husband and affair partner. That's when I discovered the contents of the book they were working on together. It was a novel. They were co-authors, and the plot revolved around a woman having a love affair with a younger man. My wife is 43 years old, and the affair partner is 28. As if that wasn't enough for the story, the main character's husband died. There are emails where she explicitly states that the husband in the book is based solely on me. It became clear to me that this was her way of acting out her messed up affair fantasies and getting rid of me via fiction. That's when I totally lost it. I decided to do some research on the guy and eventually found his girlfriend. I reached out to her via an app, and she thanked me for informing her. She was completely unaware of what was going on and was eager to learn more. I also discussed the situation with my therapist, and despite the fact that it was a huge mistake, I felt compelled to be honest with my wife about what I was doing. It's difficult to share things with your spouse, but in reality she turned out to be a cheating, lying, promise-breaking, and betrayer. The woman I contacted turned out to be extremely kind, and she was devastated by her partner's infidelity. My wife was furious that I had found and contacted her. Interestingly, despite everything that had occurred on D-Day, my wife had been secretly communicating with the affair partner behind my back. Eventually, my wife contacted the affair partner based on both my demands and the advice of our marriage therapist. But the app told her not to contact him again, which was great. Reaching out to the affair partner's partner resulted in their connection being severed, albeit temporarily. After 5 weeks, I learned from her that she had ended her relationship with him, and he was nowhere to be found. Over the last 8 weeks, my wife has gradually begun to open up. The truth came out gradually, and usually only when I pushed her, such as when I mentioned taking her phone and having an expert recover all of the deleted messages. She admitted to developing feelings for the man and that the emotional affair lasted more than 8 months. Despite this, she now begs for reconciliation. And while we have made some progress in the 2 months since D-Day, it remains emotionally and physically devastating for me. One of the most difficult realizations for me has been that my wife's sudden desire for closeness in February was motivated by her desire to be close to this other guy. I was just a backup plan for her while she waited for him to move. Despite my wife's constant denial, I've discovered concrete evidence that contradicts her claims that their relationship was non-physical. It had been a pattern of her lying about almost everything until I discovered evidence. My wife has a history of bowel obstructions and has been hospitalized twice for them. Usually, these obstructions resolve naturally within 2 to 3 days of being admitted to the hospital. It has always been a significant concern. However, On Tuesday of last week, she began experiencing severe symptoms of another obstruction, so I immediately took her to the hospital. During the initial blood test, it was discovered she was pregnant. Despite numerous previous attempts, we had never been able to conceive naturally. Our son was the result of fertility treatments. We had never had a natural pregnancy to our knowledge. So, amidst the difficult situation of my wife's bowel obstruction, we now learn of her pregnancy, which limits the treatment options for her condition. She eventually had surgery to remove a portion of her small intestine. Meanwhile, my family and close friends who are aware of the affair are questioning whether I am the father of the child. I honestly have no idea. What I do know is that we both identify as Christians, and she has always opposed abortions. I expressed my concerns about the child's paternity to her, and she is now discussing the possibility of terminating the pregnancy with anyone who will listen. After that, hey folks, here's the continuation of my saga. I resolved to take her to court, armed with damning evidence of her infidelity. I filed for divorce. You would think you'd be tough, right? But here's the kicker. I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. I felt liberated. Suddenly, I was free of the constant lies and deceptions. It felt good to stand up for myself, to prioritize myself for once. But my soon-to-be ex-wife was not taking it easy. Karma, I suppose, gets its way. She was pregnant, and the man she had an affair with refused to accept the child. He too left her, leaving her to deal with the consequences of her actions. You might think I should have felt bad for her, but I didn't. I felt relieved. I felt vindicated. Meanwhile, my ex-wife was suffering. Not only was she alone, but the man she had chosen over me was nowhere to be seen. Her infidelity cost her everything, including her family, stability, and reputation. I can't deny that seeing her reap what she sowed gave me a dark sense of satisfaction. As for the baby, that was her responsibility now. I didn't care whether the child was mine or not. I'd made my decision, and I was sticking with it. There was no room for hesitation or regret. I had given her my all, and she had discarded it for a fling. There was no going back now. As the days turned into weeks, then months, I began to experience emotions I hadn't felt in a long time. Happiness, genuine, true happiness. My heart felt lighter, my thoughts were clear, and for the first time in a long time, I was optimistic about the future. Sure, there were moments of weakness and doubt. There were times when I missed the woman I thought I'd married. Moments when I wished things had turned out differently. But those moments were fleeting. They came and went, leaving me stronger, wiser, and more determined. Looking back, I do not regret my decision. I'm feeling better now, both emotionally and mentally. And the best part? I have no resentment or bitterness, only a sense of relief and closure. I am done with the past, and I am ready for the future. My future. And you know what? It looks pretty darn good. The second story includes some background information. I'm 39 years old and my wife is 36 years old. We have been together for about 6 years and married for nearly 14 years. We have 2 sons, aged 12 and 9. Previously, my wife and I had a great relationship. Of course, we've had our fair share of arguments and disagreements, but we've never had a full-fledged fight. We have always been able to effectively communicate with one another. My wife is a hairstylist and I work as a nurse. She also worked as an educator for a well-known brand and thoroughly enjoyed her work. As for me, I've been steadily advancing in my career, and about 4 or 5 years ago, I took on the role of director. At the time, I was earning a decent living, and given that my wife, a hairstylist, frequently had to work in the evenings and weekends, she was missing out on a lot of time with our boys. That is why we chose for her to be a stay-at-home mom for our children while continuing her education role, which she genuinely enjoyed. However, when the COVID pandemic struck, her education job was no longer available. When things began to improve with COVID, I received another promotion at work. So now I'm making a good salary, and we're not concerned about her not working. In September 2020, our oldest child was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It was a significant change in our lifestyle, causing us both to experience stress, anxiety, and depression. As a result, we slowly drifted apart. We discontinued date nights for the next 2 years due to concerns about leaving our child with others. However, we are making progress in this area. During this time, we grew emotionally distant, more like roommates than partners. Throughout this, I fully admit that I wasn't the best husband. I ignored her emotions and let her feel alone, and I really wish I could change that. But unfortunately, I cannot. Although I was physically present, I was not emotionally available to her because she was unemployed. I expected her to monitor our son's blood sugar at night because I needed to get up early for work. I also expected her to do the household chores during the day. On the other hand, she began to resent me for not assisting her with household chores, or as much during difficult times with our son's fluctuating blood sugar levels as a couple who used to excel at communication. We stopped communicating altogether. We would exchange quick high fives at the door because of our busy work schedules and our boys' hectic sports schedules. We stopped making time for each other during all of this. My wife started playing Fortnite with our boys. She thoroughly enjoyed it and even played when the boys were not present. She would stay up late after I went to bed, playing while also monitoring our son's blood sugar levels. It got to the point where she was still playing when I got up, came home from work, and went to bed. Over the course of 6 months, she built an online community of friends through this game. This group of 5 to 6 people would regularly play together. This is where the act of cheating started. She formed a close friendship with one particular guy. I didn't know about this until later, but she was constantly chatting with him on Instagram. She even sent him a gift by mail. Then she devised a massive plan to visit him. She informed me that one of her old teaching friends was opening a new salon and asked if she could come over for the weekend to help with the grand opening. My wife told me this story, and since I had no reason to doubt or mistrust her, I completely believed her. She drove 10 hours to spend the weekend with a guy she met online while she was away for some reason. I accessed our iCloud account and discovered a large number of recently deleted photos. My heart sank when I saw them because they revealed what had happened throughout the journey. She essentially turned off her phone and barely communicated with me or our boys during her 4-day absence. Finally, she returned home, lied about her trip, and I confronted her about what was really going on. It took a few hours, but she eventually admitted her actions. She insists that it was purely a friendship and that nothing physical occurred. But at the end of the day, it makes no difference because she left and spent the weekend with another man. The trip took place about 6 weeks ago. Following the initial shock, something unexpected occurred. We actually had some great conversations. We talked about how we got to where we are now and how our relationship evolved. It was the best conversation we'd had in years. Throughout it all, she never attempted to minimize her actions. She accepted full responsibility for her actions, so we decided to give it another try. We both expressed our love for one another and agreed that divorce was not something either of us desired. During this time, I began seeing a therapist because I feared I would lose my sanity. After everything that had happened, the only thing I asked her to do was to completely avoid any contact with this guy. She agreed and eventually deleted Fortnite and all of her social media apps. Fast forward 2 to 3 weeks. While we were driving to my son's baseball game, I noticed she was using Snapchat on her phone. I asked her about it, and she immediately denied it. When we arrived at the game, I noticed her logging out of Snapchat, so I walked away. She eventually found me, apologized, and handed me her phone, begging me to look through it. But I wasn't interested anymore. We argued that night, and I told her to leave the house. However, we eventually settled down, and she stayed. The following weekend, I decided to look into this guy's TikTok account. And guess who I found among his followers? My wife. This leads to another heated argument in which I tell her she must leave and that I want a divorce. We slept in separate beds that night, but I didn't follow through and instead pushed the issue of her leaving. Now let's go back a few days. My children are playing Fortnite with this guy online. Later that night, I checked her phone and found a message to another online friend saying, "I feel so stupid. I wish John would join so that we could all play together." It sparks another massive fight, and this time I declare that I'm finished. I pack my belongings, leave, and spend the night at my brother's place. I am back sleeping at home. We had tickets to my youngest son's first MLB game on Saturday night, and we planned to visit an amusement park today. So, for the boys' sake, we did these activities together. We had another important conversation this morning. She said that for this to work, I needed to control my angry outbursts, which I agree are unhealthy, and I needed to stop looking through her phone. Despite her previous statement that she had nothing to hide and had left her phone unlocked for me to check if I wanted, I contacted my therapist today, and she referred me to an anger management group session, which I signed up for on Wednesday night. She assured me again that she would cut off contact with him and stop playing Fortnite because it was not worth it. She expressed her willingness to attend marriage counseling and insisted that she does not want a divorce. I awoke 3 hours ago. At 2 a.m. I went downstairs and found her playing Fortnite on the couch. She wasn't playing with that guy, but I believe she would have if he was also online. Ironically, she announced this morning that she would never play again. But here we are. I am done arguing about it. I just wished her good night and walked away. I appreciate each and every one of you who listened to the story today. If you liked what you heard, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Additionally, please leave a comment below reflecting on what happened. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you have a story to tell about your own or another person's situation. Take care.